Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today on the Finding the Beauty Within Tragedy Summit. We're so happy to have you here. So today I have the comparable Christine Agaibi here with us today, and I'll take a moment to state all of her accolades. There are many, but she has received a master's and her doctorate graduate training in counseling psychology. She's got over 20 years of research and interest in clinical areas of resilience, positive psychology, religion, spirituality, women's issues, and diversity. She's presented nationally and internationally about these topics, and she's been published over 15 times in peer-reviewed publications. She also serves right now on several task forces and addresses these issues. She's advocated for psychological professionals and clients on Capitol Hill and state leadership conferences in multiple states. She's everywhere. She's got extensive therapy experience with children, adolescents, adults, and groups. And she is the founder of CARE, which is the Center for Authentic Resilient Empowerment, which we are going to get into and talk about today. So we have a resilience scholar with us. Thanks so much for being here. I'm excited.
Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to this interview.
Yes, absolutely. So we're gonna dive in, and as this summit has been going, we like to share our stories in the beginning. So I know you have a very powerful story of what led you to your study of resiliency, and so why don't we go back and you can share that time in your life?
Yeah, when I was about 13 years old, my family and I were on our annual vacation with other family members. And my father passed away suddenly from natural causes while we were on that trip. And then my mom and I came back from the trip and had to move from where we lived within about 2 or 3 weeks to another city in another state where we had family, because we had no family where we were. So obviously that created a lot of tumult initially, at least for the first few years. And it's an awkward stage of your life to begin with when you're an adolescent. So have to have all that upheaval and change. And my father was a really wonderful father, very present, very involved in my life. So going into my bachelor's degree after that, I really wanted to help people. I don't know exactly how, but I always wanted to help people. Majored initially in biology and completed that degree, but still found a different calling to kind of figure out how to help people more in depth and really help people through some of the tragedies like I had gone through. And so I turned that into psychology and studied counseling psychology, and then more specifically resilience, and has really found my calling in that area to help other people to learn how to be resilient and to not let tragedies stop them and difficulties to stop them, especially when they're unexpected and they come from nowhere. You have to really learn how to harness those strengths and kind of build from there.
Absolutely. And it's when you're a teenager and you are thrust into loss and then moving and discovery of self and making new friends and all the things that come along with adolescence, but you add in such a traumatic loss in life, it really is hard to process at that age and find your footing. And later in life, as you are discovering who you are, you get to turn that pain into that purpose that you now live, which is what this event is all about. And we get to learn from those times. But do you remember what was your initial emotion that you felt as a teenager? Because it's hard for teenagers to process and express. So we like to talk about what we remember from that time to help others.
Yeah, it just definitely was a very big shock, of course. My dad was, like I said, a very present, comforting, loving father. And so to have that ripped out of your life so suddenly, unexpectedly, was extremely painful, of course. And then having to move and make new friends, like you said, and trying to find your footing. I would say that was the biggest challenge initially, is how to find your footing, who's there for support. Not everybody's understanding or accepting. Others were very supportive and accepting of the situation. So it was a lot of tumultuous kind of events. And, learning how to find your footing and where you stand I think, was the biggest initial part of all that. Now, several decades later, I still use that, to try to lean in more into what other people are experiencing and feeling. And that helps understand other people's pain, of course. And guiding people through that process, which I sometimes had and sometimes didn't have. So I think that's what has been the blessing out of this, is learning how to help others through that painful time and being a support.
Absolutely. And when you work with clients now, and I'm sure you've had many that have come to parents trying to navigate loss in their children, what is something that through your own experience and now in your education that you tell parents are the good initial steps to take when discussing loss and making it okay to talk about?
Yeah, it's definitely okay to talk about, and that isn't always the case. People don't know how to approach it, what's okay to say, what's not okay to say. And grief means that you're just going to experience what you're experiencing, and it's okay to sit in that feeling. And sometimes people try to run away from it, and that doesn't help. It may help initially, maybe adaptive initially, to kind of run away from it and want to hide from it, but you can't, and you have to kind of sit with those feelings and feel them and talk about them and process them in a safe and secure place, a consistent place. And so that consistency is really key as well, and being patient with yourself and with the process for sure.
Yeah, and being patient with your children's process as well too, right? Understand, letting them be expressive of whatever they're feeling and navigating that. Is that really the best way to help an adolescent maneuver, is let them kind of just word vomit it up and just be communicative. Don't push it down and hide it, because they don't really understand, nor do we understand what we feel the first time we go through grief, right?
Yeah, grief is unique to everybody, and everybody experiences in a different way. Some are frustrated, some are angry, some are upset. Some cry, some are able to express, some cannot. And that's all part of the process of learning how to heal and manage these intense emotions that are coming up for people.
Absolutely. And so I want to get into what, let's talk about first, because we're going to talk about the definition of resilience. And I love, this is Christine's definition, which if you don't mind, I'll read it.
Sure.
And it's, I love this so much. I'll tell you why I love it so much. Resilience is not the absence of difficulty. It's the conscious choice to experience the full spectrum of human emotions, to not be consumed by them, and to thrive despite them. There's so many reasons I love it, but I love it because there's a lot of definitions of resilience. Some common ones that you find will list time in them. It's how quickly you can recover from adversity. And I particularly hate that, because it means that if we don't recover quickly, there's something wrong with us. Like, we can't do this. And I don't like that limitation. So I love this definition. And this is the vision and the basis of care. So do you want to lean in and talk to us about that meaning, what it means to you, and care, how it was formed? And it's so beautiful what you do with this.
Thank you so much. So yes, there are a lot of definitions that you hear out there. You hear it thrown around in the media a lot with, pandemics and wars and things like that, that people are resilient. It is not time limited, because life ebbs and flows, and we are constantly sometimes faced with challenges, and sometimes we have a little bit of a break, but we can be resilient in the good times and in the tough times. And so it is a lifelong muscle to kind of be built. It is a long game. It isn't something that is capped at a certain age or at a certain time or at a certain situation, but it's something that we grow and develop throughout time. And so some of the research that I've conducted and some of the research that I've read is that people are able to kind of process things as they go along, and sometimes are not so positive, and that's why we have to experience the negative sometimes. And that doesn't mean that there is no negativity in the world. We're not putting our heads in the sand and having these rose-colored glasses that make everything look perfect. It's the ability to kind of build this muscle over time. It's optimal coping, throughout a lifespan, throughout long-term positive adaptation. So that's really where the kind of some of that comes from. And CARE is a educational group as well as a consultation group to help individuals, groups, businesses, whatever it is, to kind of figure out their strengths and help them to grow and lean into thriving and becoming the best that they can be.
It's a magnificent center. It's a magnificent educational platform, because people get confused on what resilience is versus what it's not. And you were touching on things that we are going to dive in further, just to foreshadow for everybody. But tell us what resilience isn't, and then we'll dive into the science behind it.
So again, it's not this toughing it up or having no feelings or being this stoic individual and tough upper lip, as they say. It's not the absence of difficulty, and it's not roughing it up or just toughing it out, but it's a learning flexibility. It's a muscle, like I said, to be built, and it's an ability to grow through your challenges eventually to get to thriving and to be the best that you can be. But that takes building. Whenever you're, preparing for a race, let's say, or you're prepping to increase your muscles, you go through some pain in that process. And it's a training process. And so it's about building, about growing, about learning, about, sometimes feeling low and sometimes feeling high. But that flexibility is what's really important. Having a mental flexibility to learn, to get up and learn again and again and again.
Right. I love that. The flexibility of it, because life is about flexibility. And when we accept that, and then we can really have a perspective on, okay, even my happy times could go away. The negative times can come. That's just how it is, right? That is what we can expect from life. And how are we going to train that muscle to be able to understand that and have tools to guide us down that road? And so speaking of the muscle, let's talk about for a second, the biology, the human physiology behind it, and give us like a roadmap of the brain and how the brain processes bad stress, and then how we can also process good stress, how our brain works, so that people understand really resilience is adaptable. So I would love you to walk us just through that process.
Yes. So for stress, for example, we hear the word stress, and there's, red flags that go up and alarm bells that say stress is bad, stress is bad. Not all stress has to be bad. For example, if you are studying for an exam that's at the end of the week, a little bit of that stress, a little bit of that tension is going to motivate you to talk to your professors. It's going to motivate you to study more, to take some extra notes, and to do whatever it takes to help you to stay, less, moving towards that goal of doing well on this exam. If that stress and your coping mechanisms are less than what the stressor is, that's when stress can become quote unquote bad, because then you get burned out, you get too stressed, you can't function, you can get physically sick, headaches and stomach aches and those kinds of things that come up. But the fear centers of the brain are then more alert and awake. And some of the research has shown that resilient brains are not that different necessarily from how they look from a non-resilient brain. The difference is their connection to the fear centers of the brain are less. So people with resilience, the connection to, let's say, the amygdala, for example, which is that fear learning center, are less than the person who is, their brain is not very resilient. So their connections to those fear centers are less. There's also some examples that there are specific markers for resilience, and they're not saying necessarily that the research is that we have less or more of something, but we may have more of the ability to change some genes for those that are resilient. So in some studies of mice, for example, the non-resilient mice used, their genetics changed about in 100 genes, whereas in the mice that were resilient, their genes changed about in 300 markers. So there's a little bit more of this adaptability in some of the genetics. But from a psychological aspect too, it's how do you play a bad hand pretty well? And so it's this upward spiral of using all of the possibilities that you have, all of the genetics that you have, all of the mental neural pathways that you have, and using that to the max to help you to improve and become more resilient. So it's using more of the tools that are already present, or creating new tools and being more creative to help you to be more resilient.
Absolutely. And then there's many things in life that can also formulate, right, that developmental side, and that's epigenetics, right? So what that is the coming together of many forms of environment and emotion and diet, a lot of things that can change the outcome of how your brain processes and adjusts and adapts. And so that's just knowledge to know, right, that your environment creates things for you, right? In simplistic terms, that you get to utilize, and know that there's things happening in your body. There's things happening to you as you grow and learn and develop. And the brain is magnificent. I mean, there's so many things, there's so many uncharted things in our brain that we don't even know about, but what we do know is really fascinating. And so when you're confused about where to go or how to be, and that's your brain processing, right? It's learning, it's growing new synapses and learning how to maneuver through life. And that brings us to a topic of, as we talk more about how to become resilient or harness the resilience that's already within us, let's talk about, because we have not talked about on this summit, which is so important, the difference between happiness and joy.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, because a lot of times those words are used synonymously. Somebody's talking about happiness when they mean joy, and they say joy when they mean happiness. They're similar, they're definitely related, but happiness is often kind of tethered to circumstances. Like I was talking about a minute ago, somebody studying for an exam. If they get a poor grade on that exam, their happiness is going to drop because it's tethered to a circumstance. Joy is part of that resilience, because you're not necessarily tethering it to to a specific circumstance, but you're joyful because you have hope, you have resilience, you know that you have the ability that tomorrow might be different. You know, the sun will come up tomorrow, as Annie said in that play or movie.
Love that.
The sun will come up tomorrow, and tomorrow may be a few days from now, maybe a few weeks from now, but nothing stays the same forever. And so that joy is tethered to that feeling that I have hope, I have goals, I'm going to work towards those goals, I'm going to stretch those muscles, that neuroplasticity of I can, increase those synapses, like you're saying. And resilience sometimes is the failure of that neuroplasticity, of that not trying to, partly neurologically, but also partly psychologically, of kind of not sitting in that mind frame of things are going to be the same way today, tomorrow, next year, 5 years from now. And so that's kind of the mindset that you need to harness for yourself as well. Knowing that you have strengths, you've gotten through bad days in the past, and you can get through this bad day as well. What strengths can I harness? What creativity can I have to increase the ability to be more resilient?
I love that, because I think when we throw around words like happiness and joy, they're simple words, but when you think about them, they really carry a lot of weight. And joy is a way of being. So
Yes.
it's not just like joy comes, right? And I call it happiness and joy. People tend to think sometimes when you're dealing in positive psychology, it's all about presenting a facade. And I call it a fakety fake life. It's fakety fake joy and happiness. It really is working on your joy and happiness. It's so much easier to be negative. That's the easy way. But happiness, like Christine said, is tied to an occurrence and that initial feeling from that occurrence. But joy is working on living in the feeling of hope and acceptance of things, and creating a life for yourself that way. So there's a lot of weight that goes with the word joy. It's not just joyful.
Yeah,
you work at it.
You definitely have to work at it. You have to work at resilience. And anything that is worth having, you have to work at. So, that's really, really important. And building that joy is important. Building that resilience is important. And like you said, we have a negativity bias kind of built in a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's built in that, we tend to lean a little bit negative, because maybe that'll help us kind of overcome, but it doesn't. What helps us overcome is actually, working at it.
Right. Leaning into whatever it is, the issue is at hand, like really dive into it. Don't gloss it over.
Right.
And why do you think, since we're talking about kind of the abstract a little bit, why do you think resilience carries that it can be an abstract concept? People don't grasp it, like, oh, it's resilience, whatever. I have it. I don't care. Why is it like that? And how can we measure it too? That's an interesting topic.
Yeah, there are actually measures out there of resilience that you can measure how much resilience you have. But again, it's not a static concept. It's constantly moving. And some days I may feel more resilient than others. But hopefully across a lifespan, I can look back and say, I was a resilient individual. So people think it's this notion that's pie in the sky and there's no real pinpoint to it, because it's so static and so moving. But that doesn't mean that I can't build muscle and build a way to grow and to thrive. And some days you're going to be lower than you should be, and some days you're going to be higher, but there are measures that you can measure resilience. So you can measure it, but it's not a static concept. I think that's why it's constantly moving. It's like waves.
Exactly. You're constantly learning. I mean, there's a science behind. I mean, Christine has spent her lifetime studying. She's a scholar of resilience. And if you dive into resilience, which this is my line of work too, and I get to learn everything that Christine has learned, but there's so many scientists just dedicated and doctors dedicated to this. So know that this isn't just something that can come so easily to everybody. This is a process that you get to really dive into and educate yourself on. And to be simple, it's magical once you get it, once you feel it, and you can do it. It becomes like a superpower.
And it definitely does occur, in different phases of your life. It occurs sometimes on a continuum, because there are multiple things in your environment, like you mentioned a little bit ago, that impact your psyche in different ways and make you fall on a resilience continuum in several ways. And so one of the models that I have published talks specifically about that you can fall on a continuum, and that's why you don't always feel resilient. Sometimes it's lower resilience, sometimes it's higher. But again, the stronger you become, it becomes kind of like a chain reaction.
Right. Absolutely, it does. And you learn how to maneuver. So when the next negative occurrence happens, it might not be the same initial shock that you got from the first. It's okay. This has happened. Now what? Because you can make a choice. Resilience is about making a choice. And do you find with working with clients, that could be the starting point of, first you get acceptance, right? We talk a lot about acceptance, but it's that question of, am I going to go up or am I going to go down? And people have a hard time with it. How do you maneuver that with your clients that come to you like, I don't want to do this?
Yeah. Yeah. And some days are hard. Some days you don't want to get out of bed. Some days you don't want to face the world, and it can be too much. And that initial stage that people have, like when I lost my dad, initially it was very shocking. There's a lot of denial that goes along with grief, and a lot of pain that goes along with that. And then slowly with time, you realize, that grief, and there's a realization that yes, there is loss, but I don't have to succumb to that loss. I don't have to give in. I don't have to just sit in this space forever. I do have a choice. And one of the premier researchers in the past on resilience, Viktor Frankl, talked a lot about that choice. In the last of human freedoms is that freedom of choice. I could sit here in this space forever, or I can get up and start moving and just put one small foot in front of the other. And that gets me to a place of searching for meaning and attaining that connection to others and looking for a brighter future. And what goals can I put for myself? And this is why it's a lifelong process. If I say by the end of December of 2022, I have to be at this place, and then I get to December and I'm not there, that's going to be shocking too. So it's a lifelong process. I have to keep going. I have to put one foot in front of the other. I keep making goals. Even if they're small steps, they're still steps.
And in the goal process too, like that's how we get ourselves out of our own way. And like you touched on in the beginning phases of grief, it's the small acts that matter. And it can be as small as, today I'm going to get up out of bed and I'm going to change my clothes. That's it. Like it doesn't have to be a grandiose goal, but once you start to reach that level of, okay, I made this goal in 6 months, and let's say you don't reach it. It's not about the self beat up, because that's going to regress us back, right? It's about okay, why didn't I reach this goal? And now how can I turn it into a different opportunity? You keep going, right? It's not about diminishing. Like, okay, I quote unquote failed at this, but I really didn't. There's a reason why I didn't make that goal, but our intention now is to keep going with it. And so I love that you touched on that of listen, everything is okay if you allow it to be, right? And I love that you brought up Viktor Frankl too, because please go and look him up if you are not familiar with him and his work. It's fascinating information. But
Absolutely.
Do you have a lot of clients that come to you that because we all do a self beat up of, I didn't do this, I didn't make this, and I didn't, like, how do you talk to your clients about that?
So let's talk about what's going well. Let's talk about what's going right. What did you do well today? Even if, like you said, it's getting up out of bed, taking your kids to school, putting on some clothes, that is important. Those are small steps. You took a step. That's what matters. The step tomorrow could be 2 steps. The day after that could be 4 steps, and you increase and build from there. How did you adapt to change? That's the key there. And again, you have to have this curiosity and this openness to just put one foot in front of the other, and every day try to increase a little bit more, and you will get to those places.
Absolutely. And let's talk about finding support in the resilience space. And resiliency is, because we talk about a lot in the summit, we're overcoming tragedies, we're overcoming huge occurrences, but resilience is a way of living in all aspects of life. And you can find support in many facets. And let's talk about the support that you can find, that you've done research on and have lived in, and then how you can put that into play with not just in loss and grief, but in everything: career, life, personal, family, all of that.
Yeah, we've got to get away from the negative spaces that can kind of keep people down. And so that can be a various amount of things. It could be your vocation, it could be your work, it could be family and friends. So you've got to find people that are consistent and supportive and understanding over the long haul. Support groups are really great for that because people that are in similar environments, they may have been in similar spaces, but that can come from multiple things. It could be religious or spiritual organizations, it could be communities, it could be book clubs, it could be a variety of things. Support groups, like I said, are really important. But we've got to get into places and spaces where people are consistent and with you for the long haul. And there's many different spaces that people can find that.
And would you say too, if there's something that someone's like, I want to work on my resilience, I really want to hone what this means and understand it, but I'm not in a grief space. I'm not in this right now. I just want to find something. Would you say attach yourself to something that is of interest? If you like philosophy, if religion or spirituality is your thing, you can find resiliency in different topics of life. So would you say that's the best approach to take of, I don't know where to start, but let me start with what I like?
Yes. And what is meaningful? What speaks to you? There is a concept out of Japan, I believe that it's called ikigai, which is a concept of something not just I'm good at, but something I'm really interested in, something that gets me up in the morning, that energizes me, that gives me meaning and purpose. And Viktor Frankl talked about the same, the meaning, the purpose behind things. And that really gives you a place to kind of, start from and interact with people of similar mind. And there you can find things that are purposeful, and you can start with resilience from there as well.
Yeah. So it's all about what speaks to you. What do you align with in your life? What are your values? And then you can work on harnessing these traits to live joyfully and then find happiness or deal with challenge. And the stages of building resilience, are there stages? And what's our pathway to get there? Because we don't really talk about the stages. That we talk about stages of grief, we talk about stages of life, but let's talk about the stages of resiliency.
Yeah, so sometimes people initially, like I said, there's this defense of denial because it's so powerful of an emotion or a difficulty or a problem that you've encountered that the first thing may be denial. Eventually, hopefully, we get to a place where we realize, like I said, that we're grieving and that there was an intense loss in our life, but we don't have to succumb to that, because some people will succumb to the loss and some people will succumb to that grief, and others will kind of dip below where their baseline was, and then they'll come back up to their baseline. And then others, hopefully, that are resilient will dip below baseline, but then thrive way beyond where their baseline was. So we want to get to that place eventually, that you initially may be shocked, you may be, I don't know how to deal with this, I don't know how to process, my thoughts are all over the place. And that definitely happens with grief or loss or any kind of challenge that happens in life. But then we have to kind of sit with the realization that I'm grieving. And grief is not just for a loss of a person, but anytime there's a change in trajectory in your life, you were going a certain way, and then this wave comes and knocks you out of the path that you were going down. So you may experience grief with that. So grieve it, absolutely feel those emotions, but then realize that I'm not going to succumb to this. I'm going to try to find meaning and purpose. I'm going to attain myself to connections and have a hope for a better future. And that's really where resilience starts. And that's where you can start that path of getting beyond baseline and getting to thriving.
Yes, I love. There's always a place to start. Even if it seems like this is the most negative place to start, the negative place to start will create the most positive outcome if you allow yourself to sit in that. And that's what we don't allow ourselves to do. It's, oh, I don't want to hear this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to feel this. But realizing, like we talked about earlier, whatever this is and whatever stress that may be from it, when you build your resilience level, that stress can be the good stress that propels you to find that next level, that next stage. So just start anywhere. Absolutely.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you had also, that kind of segues us back to what you had brought up earlier with neuroplasticity and working out the muscle. So can you give us a brief overview? Because I don't even know if I really touched on the definition. I keep saying it in the summit, but neuroplasticity is what? And there's a lot of stuff you can look on, but it is what, just for people to understand.
Just the ability to grow. It's plastic. So plastic is malleable and it changes, and it kind of sometimes shapes to the environment that it's in. And so that's what it is. It's not this rigidity. That rigidity does not help with resilience. It's being flexible, sitting in different opportunities, giving yourself openness to opportunities. And that expands your mind and your ability of your mind to problem solve, to be creative, to think of solutions. However, when we think negative, we kind of shut down. It becomes like this tunnel vision, and all we see is the problem. But when we expand our thinking, that neuroplasticity comes in, we're able to be more malleable, more flexible, more open to opportunity, and that presents, resilience. It starts resilience.
Absolutely. Right. So it's the flexing of that muscle, the building upon, because like you said, it's not just this one static muscle that doesn't do anything. It grows and bends. There's many things you can learn about neuroplasticity. It's very interesting. And let's talk about the factors that go into the malleability of the muscle. What are some factors of how to cultivate that so we can flex our brain into the learning process?
Yeah, so some of the model that I brought up before, there's kind of personality characteristics, like I said, and environmental factors. So some of the characteristics that we have seen in people that are more resilient, they tend to be this really strong-willed, hardworking, open-minded. They have a lot of gratitude. Gratitude helps us to kind of shift our focus from all of the things that are going wrong, which we can name 100 in a second, but there is so much that is going right as well. And their focus is shifted towards that gratitude. They have a strong desire and will to live with meaning and with purpose. Some may even have humor, even in the midst of difficulty, that they're looking for that positivity. They tend to be more determined. They don't give up. They have this sense of hope. Their ability to, like I said, be present in multiple different scenarios, and they're still able to enjoy life despite having that difficulty. So there's lots of different great factors that personality-wise we can do. From environmental factors, again, you need to have good relationships. You need to be connected to people, not see situations as insurmountable. I can climb this mountain. How am I going to do that? I can make good, decisive decisions. I can make wise decisions. They're active in meaningful activities. They're engaged in therapy and good relationships with family and friends, and have helpful people in their lives. So there's environmental factors, and then there's these personality characteristics that help people as well.
And I love that you brought up gratitude, because like you said, in a split second, we could list 50 things that are going wrong. But why is it that we have such a difficult time being gracious or thankful for things that have happened? We forget about those things. And it's in those moments of, I feel, right? It's just that weighted feeling of nothing is going right. It's in that moment where you ground yourself, which I want to talk about this in a second too. We're going to dive into a little bit more of positive psychology, but you're grounding yourself in optimism to realize, okay, this is happening. Let me think of one thing that I'm grateful for. Whatever that one thing is, that's a lift, right? That's the elevator that's going to get you to the next level of, yep, all this is going on, but I have this. It's being grateful. And that's simple, right? It's the simple things. We don't have to make it so difficult. And
even two or three things per day that have gone well shifts your thinking towards that positive.
It really, really does. And so positive psychology, this is going to kind of tie into, people will have a misconception of being a positive just means that I'm being happy. Let's talk about in resilience. You'll read when you start to study or look up resilience about there's 10 scientific factors that make up, resilience and positive psychology. A lot of that's in grounded optimism. We find this in like social behaviors and our support, but you had touched on our belief system as well. Can you touch on the different factors of positive psychology, what it truly is grounded in? And we've talking about this the whole interview, but can you list some of those things so that people understand the levels?
So again, one of the criticisms, like you brought up, of positive psychology is it's this rose-colored glasses. Everything in the world is always rainbows and beautiful and wonderful. And that's not necessarily the fact. It's the study of how to optimally thrive and what can we harness inside of ourselves to optimally thrive. It is not neglecting that there's wars and pandemics and that there's difficulties. Of course, those things are there. But how do we look for opportunities of self-discovery within those challenges, nurturing this positive sense of self and keeping things in perspective? Because again, life is a wave. Bad things come and then good things come, and then bad things come again and challenges. But how do we take care of ourselves in that? How do we move towards goals? How do we take decisive action? How do we make connections and not see every problem as insurmountable during those challenges? And we can balance many different areas of our life to help us to get there. So how can I promote resilience and balance in my life to achieve those goals? It's not just this rose-colored glasses. It's how do I thrive despite that, or in spite of that?
Right. And there's so many levels to gain that understanding of if you have a role model in your life, leaning into that role model, mimicking what they do in ways of being, right? Not in what they say. We're not saying change your personality, be who you are, but
Mhm.
role models are a great way for us to practice what we like about that person and put it into our lives. Exercise, right? Our when we exercise, when we do things, even a simple walk, it releases chemicals in our brains. We know this. So
Mhm.
there's things that you can go to help you reach that positive level of psychology in a grounded fashion, in an intentional fashion.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you did touch on that as well. It's a multiple process, bio, psycho, social, and spiritual even. You have to sleep enough, you have to eat the right foods, you have to take those walks, like you're saying. Social is the community part of it. Who are you connected to? Psychological is not falling into those cognitive distortions and sitting with those distortions. And then spiritual, knowing that you're connected to something higher than yourself, something meaningful, something purposeful. And those in connection make us resilient.
Yes. And you just touched on community, which I think is a great topic because now the world, having gone through a pandemic, having been in the crux of non-social, right? Our community was separated. We
Right.
were lost. We were distraught.
Mhm.
We all now know the importance of that. We all now know the importance of being connected. And so let's talk for a little bit about how we cultivate a more positive community and finding the right people. And what, if we don't have that, what it does to our growth or lack thereof of resilience.
Yeah, community is so important. And speaking of resilience, we have found ways to adapt through the pandemic. We've, established more Zoom meetings and all those other type of things to connect with others. So the devices that we have should help us to connect while we're still kind of getting out of this pandemic and those kinds of things. But find a moment where you felt deeper to a community and lean into that as well. So cultivating your own character strengths, but also and leaning on your own personal story of resilience, but also promoting altruism and helping and connecting and joining with others, because those have been shown to be really important for our well-being as well. So self-care is super, super, super important. And then once you've established that self-care, lean into a community, serve others, help others, be altruistic, connect with other people. That's really important, even if it's just through Zoom, but hopefully getting out of that category as well and getting out into the world again.
Yeah, any way to connect is better than not connecting at all. And I love that you brought up the altruistic aspect of things because I personally remember when I was in my darkest space of
Mhm.
my grief journey, when I
Mhm.
did one simple thing for someone else, it made it like clicked my brain on and I
Mhm.
realized, oh, I'm happy in that moment. I'm joyful in this moment. I've done something good. And to
Mhm.
me, it wasn't like I was consciously setting out to be like, let's be good and do something. It's I wanted to do it. And the
Yes.
sense of wanting to do that was a huge win in the space that I was in. And then feeling the emotion that I got from giving someone else
Mhm.
was an even bigger win. And so it's amazing how
Mhm.
you can take something and be of service to someone else. And even if it's the simplest thing, somebody else needed a hug that day
Yeah.
and you gave that to them, you get that feeling back of, okay, I am capable of feeling again. I am
Right.
capable of doing. I mean, it sounds simple,
Mhm.
but that really, we can make life simple that way. And there's such a power in that way we don't really think about.
Yeah, absolutely. That altruism is so important. Like you said, it helps you to feel again. Because
Yeah.
one of those first things with grief and tragedy and challenges is numbness because we're in denial. We can't process everything that's happening. So this kind of snaps you back into a community a little bit and helps you even with the self-care piece because it brings you back positive emotions and those are important.
Absolutely. And you are a scholar of resilience. And even when people study and know the process and know what to do, we all need an outlet, right? So when you have feelings of either a trigger, grief coming back in, a new occurrence that's come that is shocking, what are
Mhm.
some things that you get to remind yourself of and teach people that you can study something forever, but it's really once you put it into practice and knowing I get to turn and ask for help too, that's also important.
It is important to know that sometimes you are going to have those moments of challenges. And I've had moments of challenges since losing my dad. and other moments of real intense joy as well. But those positive emotions are really important to foster and to keep increasing, because they increase your ability to challenge yourself and to move forward from a difficult time. But it is absolutely okay to ask for help. You're not alone. There's lots of people willing to help and support in a professional aspect and beyond that in a community. And so it's really important that you ask for help when you need it, and know that this moment isn't forever. And you just need a guiding hand to help you through it.
I love that. I love that so much. And I also want to touch on the different types of losses, where it's a loss of a career, or the loss of you're having a divorce, it's the loss of a marriage, it's the loss of a dream that could have been. And that is something that we don't give ourselves enough grace with to understand when people are in that space, because it is a grief space and we don't recognize it as such sometimes. But if somebody would come to you and say, I don't know where to go in this career or whatever, this is a place to hone in on your resilience, right? Let's talk about the other things that aren't associated with a death loss, and talk about how we get to examine that situation and give ourselves space for it. And then a specific tool that you would use, whether it's positive reappraisal or whatever it is, a specific tool that you give people to say, okay, when you work in this space, we can do this.
Yeah, great question. And I think a loss of identity comes with a lot of those things that you've said as well. A loss of a dream, a loss of stability. You had, a certain sense of stability in a relationship or whatever it is, and you've lost your footing a little bit, which I definitely experienced when I lost my dad, and in other challenges as well. So you have to realize that it's okay. The ground is shaking a little bit under you, but we're going to figure this out. And again, taking those baby steps day by day. You can take assessments, for example, the VIA character assessments, to help you figure out what your strengths are. And those strengths are so great because they're found in people all around the world, regardless of race, culture, ethnicity, socioeconomic status. We all have these strengths within us. And they not only help me because they're value systems, but they also help other people as well. So I can first start by figuring out what my strengths are and lean into those strengths a little bit more. And this is a time for a lot of self-exploration as well. You may have been in one career or one relationship, but it's, again, being in that flexibility. What else can I do? What else can I open my mind to? And have this ability to be open-minded. And I think that's one of the greatest characteristics of resilience, is to be open to new experiences. You've been in one space, that's okay, that worked for that time. Now you need to expand a little bit and go into a different space, and that's okay. So being that flexible and open-minded and going into new experiences can be really helpful as well.
I love that. It's about the narrative shift, right? And perspective is important, because we'll look at a situation. Let's say it's the worst thing that's ever happened to you, right? And you're like, there is no beauty in this. There is no joy in this. There's no this. Well, acknowledge the fact that we're not saying that act is the joy. It's that it's the perspective. It's shifting of what can I create from this? What opportunity can I make for myself that allows this to become something else, right? It's taking a bad thing, acknowledging it's bad, shifting the perspective and moving on with it, not forgetting it, not stuffing it away, use it to our benefit.
Yeah. And we can definitely learn from every experience. Yes, this was a bad experience. We're not saying that it wasn't. Now, like you're saying, how do you shift your perspective and grow and develop something out of this? So creating something else and expanding our mind and being open to new experiences. And that's been one of my greatest blessings personally, is that opening myself and saying yes to things. It's not no, and it's the and kind of perspective. Let me say yes to something else.
Right. It's having the both and, right? You'll hear people talk about the both and. I can do it all, be it all. You don't have to do it all and be it all, but you can find that balance of, if I want this, but I'm limited in this, how do I create the both? And it's that bigger plate perspective. And the growth opportunity, like you said, in that is really powerful, because everything that crosses our path is a lesson. Everything will teach us, but it's having that open mind. When you don't have an open mind, you're going to miss everything. And you're going to be
flexible. Yeah.
Right. And you're going to close the doors to understanding a perspective like what we're talking about. I have many people come to me and say, this is a ridiculous theory, right? Of that there's beauty in tragedy. Many people. I said, well, what else can we look at that makes the situation beautiful? When you attack something instead of, and it's about, oh, I would love your opinion on this. It's about the delivery, right? If you believe something, if you believe this is ridiculous, okay, you're already closing yourself down to another perspective, gaining education from someone else's experience. If you come to someone and you're like, I don't understand this concept, can you, right? You just saying that to you versus I don't like this way, but can you help me understand? Explain how we connect as humans that way and how our brain really will then accept the information.
Yeah, I think some people think that if you're just saying, I'm not, I'm just moving on from this tragedy, that means I forgot about it. It's not about minimizing the tragedy or how difficult it was or how challenging it was or how painful it was. We're not minimizing any of that. It's just, what else can I do from this point forward? Because the tragedy is still there. It's still sad that you had this loss, or that's still present. What else can I do beyond that? Now what else? And that's about, like I said, taking the next step. Or are we going to stay in the same space forever of being upset and grieving and all those things? That you can do both. That's what resilience is. It's holding both at the same time. I can hold the tragedy and I can hold hope and progress and moving forward. It's not minimizing one for the other. And so that's what opens up your mind a little bit and looks for opportunities and places to move forward.
Right. And that's your self-leadership. How are you going to lead yourself in your own life? Are you going to constantly keep closing the door in your face? Because that's what you're doing. That's what people are doing when they're not open to understand or perspective. They're just shutting every door in front of them that really has the possibility to open up to so much more. So just being open, practicing openness is your own leadership. It's your self-communication with how you want to live in the world. How do you want to be in this world? How do you want to spread yourself, right?
The grief is not the end of the story. The challenge is not the end of the story. There's more. There's more.
There is more. And it really is why I'm in this work, is when I hear people say, I cannot get over this. I've had many people say, I just want to leave. I want to die. I want to be with my person. I don't want to be here. And they're living to die. What a waste of an experience. What a waste of the life that was lost, because you can make something from that. And you're supposed to be here. How do we
honoring your life and your own life by making something of that experience? You're honoring both people in this case. Yeah.
How do we grasp that concept of not allowing a person or an occurrence be in vain for the rest of our lives?
Yeah, like I said, there's more to the story, and we have to see that there's more to the story. And you're honoring that person by getting up and telling their story and, saying what happened and speaking about them. And in that rawness of it initially, that's hard to do. Right. It's okay to sit in that grief for a little bit and see what this person has meant to you. But then we have to get up and tell their story and tell our story and how we've overcome and what has helped. And that can be somebody else's saving grace as well, because that may be something that they can do to help themselves through their grief. So we all share, all 8 billion of us share things like happiness and joy and sadness. We all experience sadness and grief. And so that journey can be somebody else's kind of saving grace to help them too. Like
and a guidebook. Absolutely. We become educators too, right? Yes. For each other. And which is a role that you don't assume that you're going to take on once you've gone through something. But when you choose to do that, you're educating not only yourself, but others that spread, normalcy, for your processes, which really what is normal anyways, it's life is just life, and you get to make of it what you want. But do you feel that when you were just talking about how to not make something in vain and living in celebration of your life, that is a direct correlation of your own self-worth.
Yes.
And why don't people think of it like that?
Very interesting question. Some of it, like I said, they're afraid to lose that grief because that means they've lost that person, but you are still a survivor. We have to see ourselves as that. And that means I am valuable and I am worthy and I do have a story to tell. And that story is important. And I can show that in my resilience, in the efforts that I put forward to help others, to help myself, to get up, to grow, to thrive.
Exactly. How important are you to you? And
Mhm.
then that makes you important to other people. It starts with us. It
Yeah.
starts with that core belief system, which
Mhm.
gets to be worked on your whole life, right?
Yep.
I mean, we are our
Absolutely.
own self-sabotagers with what we
Yep.
believe of ourselves.
Yeah.
And then we allow so many other things to come in. But
Mhm.
how you view yourself is
Mhm.
how the world will view you. And so it's
Yeah.
most important to start inward and do the
Mhm.
work.
Absolutely. And it does take work. It's not just going to come and land on us, like you said a few minutes ago. We have to do the work. Anything that is valuable and worthy is going to take work, whether it's business or family or whatever it is. It's going to take work, yes, but you're going to see yourself thriving at the results of that and expanding and better one step at a time.
And you'll never understand what that thriving looks like until you actually do it, right? Until you actually just take that first step of work. And it's an interesting concept when you think about it, of how much emphasis we put into, honing our craft in business, right? Honing
Yeah.
our talent on an athletic field or whatever.
Mhm.
But we
Mhm.
don't take the same amount of time to work on our mental space.
Right.
It's coming to the forefront now. There's so much more conversation about it. Thank
Mhm.
goodness.
Yeah.
But why is it that we never give credit to
Mhm.
working out our brain in this sense? It's
Mhm.
equally as important, because without this, none of this works.
Yeah. And there's a strong connection between mind and body. So you may feel it in your body before you even are willing to acknowledge it in your mind. Like I said, I get people that come in with headaches or with stomach aches all the time or other issues physically. So, yes, the mind kind of is really, really important to get it to be as healthy as it can be. And some days you may not feel that. That's okay. Just don't sit in that space for too long. Think about the gratitude, think about the curiosity, think about the creativity. What else can I do? And it's okay to wallow for a little bit, but then get up and walk away from that and think about the next steps.
Absolutely. And it's, all the shadow anniversaries that come up in my life, I know, just
Mhm.
as an example, share a little story. Coming up is the anniversary of my brother's death. I know that week I'm going to have anxiety in anticipation of that. And that's
Mhm.
okay. I learned to have a lot of grace with myself that week. I've learned over the years what works. And then
Mhm.
on that particular day, I clear my schedule completely. I
Mhm.
spend time with me. I do
Mhm.
things that my brother and I like to do together. We used to watch movies all the time. I do that. I
Okay.
eat his favorite meal. And then I
Mhm.
know the next day I'm going to get back up and I'm going to go and do other things. Because once the day comes, I'm fine.
Mhm.
It's celebrating the life, but that's what
Anticipation.
works for me. But
Mhm.
then I know I'm going to live in that space. I'm going to be
Mhm.
okay with it. But then I have an intention for the next day. So
Mhm.
everything's okay. Whatever works for you is okay.
Yeah, because everybody grieves differently because we're all unique. I mean, we have themes that kind of weave through our lives that are similar, like I said, joy and grief and all those things, but our expression of that is different for every individual. And so, yes, anniversaries are definitely difficult. It's been a few decades since I lost my dad, but I do similar things. I really think of him on that day. You can have a service or some sort to kind of memorialize that person. And then what do I do tomorrow to honor his life in another way? And that's important as well. And so it's about taking those steps and knowing that it is okay on those days that are tough. They happen. They're gonna happen.
Yeah. Don't overexert yourself. It's what
Yeah.
you're feeling. Go with the feeling and
Hmm.
learn from the feeling. That feeling will teach you so much if
Hmm.
you're open to it. Be
Yeah.
open to it, and
Hmm.
just learn from your experiences and grow. And Christine, this has been, I love this interview so much, because you are just, we could talk. We've talked about this prior to filming. We could go on and on and on and break this
Absolutely.
down. And I just appreciate all your knowledge and service in this industry and educating so many on the importance of resilience. And I want to just, as we close, do you have any closing thoughts that you would like to leave people with?
Yeah, just to remember that resilience is a lifelong process. If you're not feeling it today, that's actually part of the process. But what are those feelings telling you? What are you learning from them? And knowing that you can get up tomorrow and try again and keep trying, and that resilience is truly a lifelong process across those human emotions, across the spectrum of human experiences. And resilience is a muscle to grow. So every day you're growing it in a certain way. So keep growing those muscles.
Beautiful. And if somebody wants to learn about care and they want to come to you, explain the process of what they'll find and what they will learn by coming to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can go to my website, which is CA Resilience, which is care resilience, kind of a mesh of those two words together. And you can book a consultation on there. You can book a speaking engagement, or something for your business as well, a consultation for that. I've also done courses in the past, so they can do courses based on what their needs are. But it's a place to come and learn. I have resources on there. I have a blog up there that I put thoughts about positive psychology and resilience. But that's a place that you can come and learn, and also book consultations for yourself or your group or others.
It's a great site. I hope everybody goes to it. There's also videos of some of Christine's talks that she's done on there, which are fascinating to watch and learn from. So go check it out. You can learn so much. If this is the only place that you turn to learn about resilience, definitely go to her site, because it carries the weight and the just open wingspan of what you could learn about resilience. And then give her a call if you want to learn even more and further. So thank you so much, Christine, for today. This was beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me and for spreading this important message. We all need resilience, and I hope we continue to learn more and more about it.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. And everybody, thanks for watching today, and have grace with yourselves. See you next time.